Hometown, hope you enjoy the class today. We're handling objections. Dean Cheatham's the moderator. I'm Adrian Spears. I've got 21 years experience, all with Hometown. I'm going to talk about handling objections for buyers. And Blakely Smith has got a lot of years in the business as well here at Hometown, and he's going to talk specifically about objections with sellers today in this current market and how to better yourself and get ready to handle those. Thanks so much.
Mike, so today we're talking a little bit about objection handling, and we have two expert objection handlers and real estate agents. We have Blakely Smith, and I will sort of give you guys an intro. We didn't really talk about this. So Blakely came to Hometown Realty. Anybody know what Blakely was doing before he came to Hometown Realty? He was working on the back of a fishing boat.
True.
Mostly fishing in the bay and in the Rappahannock River, some in the ocean too, right? And I guess you got to know Mike and Cindy and Rodney's dad, Mr. one Melvin Chenault.
Indeed.
And he probably said something like, "Blakely, you're too smart to be doing this every day."
You hooked up with Mike?
Yeah, Mike can get you going in the real estate business. And so that was what year?
I started fishing with Melvin way back, but in 05, it's kind of when I got hooked up with Mike.
And when you came to Hometown?
06.
Yeah.
May 06, yeah.
Very good. Then I remember first time I met Adrian, we had a sales meeting. Were we in the Mechanicsville office, or where was the sales meeting?
We were talking about this the other day. What's the near the Links condo?
Oh yeah. The Virginia Center crossing kind of thing. We had our meetings. We were like rent the space. Remember that, Mike? We'd rent that space. And I saw like this real tall dude, and I went and introduced myself. Turned out he went to the greatest college in America, Hampton City, obviously, and which we have in common. And then next one thing led to another. And what year was that? 2002. So Adrian had gone to law school for how many semesters?
2.
Most people it takes them 3 years to get out of law school. He did it in 1.
Yeah.
Now he didn't get the degree and all that kind of stuff, but he picked up all the knowledge that he needed, and he was moving on. And then
much better.
wound up back then there really weren't a lot of teams, and so, but so Mike had sort of done a team, and were there anybody? Nobody else really had a team here, but we were sort of doing some team stuff. Anyway, so Adrian's been working with me ever since then, and originally from Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. So if you need a translation of anything he says, we have a translator available. And Blakely sort of has a dialect from Northern Neck dialect too, so it may be hard to understand this. But anyway, back to objections. So the first question I'll ask you is, how does that fit into your business as being a real estate agent? Where does this rank as far as a skill set that you need to develop, and how often do you use it? How important is it? Start with you, Adrian.
Very important. You're going to get objections no matter who you're dealing with. Experienced client, not experienced client, young, old, doesn't really matter. But what I've been able to do over time is learn the handful of objections they are, and really try to attack those before they ever come up. And that is just through education. From the first appointment to the second last, whatever, anytime I show somebody a house or meet somebody as far as buyers go, I'm talking to them and telling them every little thing about not only the house, but potentially how the transaction is going to go, how negotiation is going to go, how the home inspection is going to go, the loan process is going to go. So I try to lead with that, so I get less objections.
So pro tip number 1 would be, rather than worrying about handling objections, educate so that what happens?
That you don't get it, or when you get it, you're saying it for a second time is much more authentic.
That makes a lot of sense. So basically educating through the process so that there may not be as many objections coming up down the line.
I see the process as the education throughout. It's not trying to find the right house for them. That's gonna happen. I'm gonna learn what they want. We're gonna get to that. But the easier path and quicker path to that is education from day one going forward.
Makes great sense.
I think it's, especially on the buyer side, but on the seller side, I think it's very important to, when you're sitting down with those people on the very first phone call, is getting that pre-qualification going and trying to figure out everything your client needs and what they want. And then, you know, on the seller side, you know you're gonna get commission. I mean, at least I get it almost every time, so you gotta know how to handle that. You
The
gotta
commission objection.
Correct.
Meaning they wanna pay you less.
Correct.
They never tell you they wanna pay you more?
Never.
Okay.
It starts at 6 and goes up. But, I mean, you gotta know how to pivot, so when you get those questions, you gotta answer them and then pivot and get off of it. No matter what the objection is, I mean, you don't wanna just stay there forever. But yeah, education, like when I'm listing a house, I'm always telling them, what's the next step, what's the next step? We're gonna get these showings, we're gonna get a contract, we're gonna do, you know, termite well, septic, whatever the case may be, the home inspection. There's gonna be issues, but, if you lay it out in front of them before, you're gonna get a whole lot less objections.
So tell me, let's define that for the group. What is an objection?
Usually something they wanna negotiate.
Okay.
I see a lot of times is the person's either nervous, frustrated. I see it as a psychological thing. They're nervous, frustrated. Maybe the spouses aren't on the same page. They're talking to other parents, they're not on the same page. That's how I read it most of the time. And other times it's just, you know, personalities. You know, you have a high analytical, you have somebody that, you know, all the different personalities.
So it can come from a number of different places. Could it be something maybe that they feel like they've got to just, like the commission thing, maybe somebody told them that, or maybe it's just something they feel like they have to say?
Yeah, I mean,
Read in the paper or something, you know?
Yeah,
it's all
or,
online.
you know, I feel like I hear a lot, I've got a relative or I've got somebody else that said they would do it for 5. Or, you know, and then they feel like they gotta ask for it, and then they're gonna try to chisel you and chisel you and chisel you until you do it.
You think it's ever a test?
I think it's definitely a test.
And what does that mean?
You know, I mean, I mean, it depends on who you're dealing with, but I mean, some people negotiate everything.
Yeah.
You know, and the pushback, I mean, you gotta be able to push back on that, and when you do push back on that, you gotta be able to pivot to something else. I mean, if somebody asks me, you know, I need you to reduce your commission. Well, the first thing I'm gonna say is, we're not a discount brokerage. You know, tell me more about where you said you needed to move to. You know, I'm gonna have something, I'm gonna redirect them in a different direction.
So what do we call it, when we were talking about this the other day, do you remember what the term, I don't know if I said it, or you said it, stick and move
Like,
technique?
yeah, you gotta.
Sort of like the boxing technique, you know?
You gotta have a good pivot, or at least a pivot. So I mean, if you're a listing agent, I can't tell you how many appointments that I go on that there's very few that the person never says something about commission. Whether they just say straight up it's 6%, right? And then you just, yeah, it is, you just keep on getting. But, most of the time, I mean, they're gonna try to chisel a little bit.
What do you think it would have cost you? When did you start your business?
Let's see.
06. So since 06, how much money, if you had never, I'm not saying that you've never discounted a commission, because you probably have at some point, but if you'd have just laid down, every time somebody would have brought that up, what kind of money do you think it would have cost you over that time?
Probably hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's shocking.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
if 6% versus 5% or 10% versus 8% on land, I mean, yeah, a lot,
Yeah.
over 18 years. That's a
So
lot.
it's having that skill in essence has
Yeah.
saved you a lot of money.
Yeah, and I mean, every client's different, and I mean, you gotta know how to read your client, and I think a lot of that comes with the pre-qualification part of it. But for me, I mean, I've had really difficult clients that really wanted to negotiate and wouldn't come off of it. And you pivot and they come back to it, and you pivot and they come back to it again. And, you know, my second thing is always, you know, our broker just doesn't allow us to do that. And, you know, if that doesn't work, you gotta go into a different avenue.
Tell the story about the recent one where those didn't work.
This was probably 2012. I know I'm gonna get chiseled. I just sold him the house like 2 years prior. He got a job transfer. I'm sitting down with him and he's pounding me on commission. He's beating me to death. And I'm trying to figure out where to go with this guy, and I don't really know. And I'm on the fly. I'm like, all right, I tell you what. Let's go through my marketing plan. You tell me what you don't want me to do, and I'll take that back to the broker and see if we can get permission to cut it off, to reduce it. How's that sound? He's like, that sounds great. I'm like, okay. First thing we do is we price your home competitively, because competitive houses sell, non-competitive houses don't sell if we overprice it. So we're gonna go through the comps, we're gonna do all that, and we're gonna figure out the right price for your home. Is that something you think we should do? He's like, yeah, we should do that. I'm like, we're gonna develop a top selling features of your home. We're gonna come up with a really robust description. We're gonna stage your house. We're gonna get it all straight. It's gonna be perfect when it hits the market. Is that something you think we should do? Yeah, I want that, so we check that. I'm like, we're gonna put your home on the MLS, and it's gonna go out to 120 different websites, so everybody can see it. It's probably gonna be the #1 sales tool for your home. Is that something you want me to do? Oh yeah, we're gonna do that. And then I kept going, went through the 10-point marketing plan all the way to the end. He wants all 10 points. I'm like, well then you want full service, right? You don't want discount. He said, yeah, but I want full service, but I want a discount on the commission. I'm like, but it doesn't work that way. So after about a 15-minute haggling, I got him to sign at 6%. So I was probably 7 years in the business at that point, and my head was about to explode when I walked out of that place, because I was like the happiest person in the world. Just because he was a tough guy. I mean, he was a doctor. I just sold him the house, and he wanted that commission bad, and I came out of there with full commission, so I was really happy about that.
That's good. Adrian, do you have like an experience recently where you had somebody who was maybe hung up on something, had some kind of objection, and you were able to work through it?
Yeah, I think human nature is when you have friction with somebody else, you want to kind of avoid it a little bit, or the guy's giving you objections or whatever it might be, but you have to resist that. You have to communicate that much more, and it's not a text message, it's not an email. I mean, those things have their places, but you need to be talking to them and talking to them on the phone. And I had a situation lately that, you know, the husband and wife are on different wavelengths. He is maybe more resistant, high analytical, the ego is getting in his way, and then the wife has already packed up the house. So I was like, I texted them both, what time I'm available now, you guys open for a conference call now. I want them both to be on the phone, both to be on the same page, because a lot of times you'll get used to talking to just one spouse, and it could be going great or not great or either way, but you need to be talking to both. Or whoever might be the decision maker, you need to be talking to them. So that's what I would say. I know Blake does this as well, is he communicates more with his clients than the average agent, you know, and it's just no real secret other way to do it. He's available and he talks to them more, and he'll talk to them maybe before they call him. He's calling first, laying the groundwork so they don't build some, you know, boogeyman in the closet idea in their head. You've already talked them off the ledge before they walked up to the ledge, basically. So I think communication is key, and sometimes meeting them face to face. Maybe it's a buyer, they have all these different questions. On the phone is the best way, much better than text or anything else, but sometimes you have to just book the appointment and go out there and meet them and walk a house and look it over, and that way you can give them examples versus them stressing out about it at 9 o'clock at night or whatever it is when they're trying to go to bed. So
Yeah, they're steaming when they're leaving you voicemail, so answer the phone. I mean, it just gets worse if you don't answer the phone.
Yeah. And if you can't, what if they do? What if it's just not possible? How do you wait?
I mean, I try to call them back as soon as possible, because I don't want it on my plate either.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to go to sleep with that rotten voicemail on my phone, personally.
So we're talking basically, you know, I guess Blake is sort of handling more of the seller side of thing and the buyer side, but you guys feel to cross over if you want to. But when you know, Adrian talked about the education, I think Blakely does that too. But when do the objections usually come up? What's the setting, and when during the transaction?
For the buyer right now, it's usually when they started looking. Maybe they made an offer or two, they're getting smoked, they're getting beat out, they're not taking your advice, or maybe they're taking your advice perfectly. Now all of a sudden they're trying to regroup, because buying a house, selling a house is an emotional thing, there's no way around it. Whether somebody wants to admit that or not, it's always gonna be. So you have, you know, the biggest purchase they've ever made, or biggest sale they've ever made, and then the emotional baggage that goes along with that. So the one we're starting to hear now with interest rates is, Adrian, I think we should just wait. We're gonna wait till the prices come down, we'll wait till the interest rates come down. And first of all, you wanna affirm that feeling. And what they're feeling is frustration in the market. But guys, I get it. It is not an easy time to buy a house right now. It is, we've been battling out, it's a war zone. So you wanna affirm that, because that's what's going on. There's no real way around it. And if you get the sense that they're sticking pretty hard and they made a group decision or a family or couple decision, then they say, hey, let's take this weekend off. Let's look online. Let's look at some pictures and stuff. Let me look around, but let's also be ready to pounce, because I think other people are thinking like you're thinking right now. They may be under contract and they get today's interest rate and they're like, well, we can afford that. We're just scared, and this came out in the news and whatever else, and all of a sudden that house came back on the market. That's the perfect time for us to get in there and pounce. We don't have to compete against 12 other offers, something like that. So maybe take a little breather. You may want a breather from them as well. Maybe it's good for both of you. So I like the whole analogy, hey, we're gonna buy in a year. That means they're gonna buy in 6 months. Well, the inverse is the same thing. Hey, we're gonna wait 6 months, before we buy or start looking again. They're gonna be with somebody in 3 months, so it better be you. You better be ready for that. So I would say take a week or two off, whatever it might be. Let's get every kids back in school, whatever's going on that time of year, and hit the ground running in September, but still staying in communication with them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for me, most of the objections from the seller will come at the listing table. I think that's kind of when I lay my groundwork and figure out most of those issues. They also come at the home inspection. When you get that home inspection report, the seller's like, I'm not doing anything. Then you gotta go back to their motivation. When we listed your house, you told me you absolutely had to sell, you had a job transfer, so we gotta figure this out. We can't just say we're not doing anything, the buyer's probably gonna walk. Even though home inspections over the last 10 years have changed, but I'm starting to see more home inspections now.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I had a guy sign a home inspection addendum 2 weeks ago, didn't want any prices. He said, I'll just get it fixed, get your contractor to do it. My contractor gives him an estimate, he goes, I'm not doing any of those. I'm like, oh. That's kind of an issue. And he really did have to sell the house. So ultimately, we ended up working it out and the guy did the work, but he ended up making me get 3 other estimates. My first guy was the lowest, so it made me look good at the end of the day. We had a huge septic issue on the same house. The septic was 15 feet to ground. We had to get an excavator to come out there to dig it up. It was a train wreck. It cost $2,500 just to dig it up, not including the inspection. So you got objections all the time throughout the whole transaction. It's just how you get around them. That was the 7th inspection company we called that could do it. That was the only one that could do it.
Wow.
Nobody else could do it. So it was a real big pain in the butt trying to navigate through that whole issue, but the seller was very difficult to deal with, and he's wondering why he doesn't have his wire today when he closed yesterday. It was one at 9 a.m. It's something all the time with the seller.
Where does, you use the word motivation, how does motivation work into this whole idea of objections and objection handling?
If they're not motivated and they're a seller, it's gonna be a difficult process. You will probably have pricing issues, across the board issues if they have no motivation. They're not gonna want to price it to sell, number one. And I think that goes back to the mentality of the buyer nowadays. If you don't have the home priced correctly, the buyer already kind of knows in their head they're gonna have to pay over to get something. And if you've already got it priced 30 or 40 over from where it should be, it's gonna be a big issue. So I try to have those conversations with these sellers when we see pricing in MLS at $480 of a closed house and it was listed at $450, and they wanna list theirs at $480, it's gonna be kind of tough, because that buyer is probably not gonna wanna look at your house because it's overpriced to start out with. Instead of that buyer coming up and paying $30,000 over, they're not gonna wanna pay $30,000 over if you're already at the peak of the market. So, those are mine.
How about you, Adrian, on the motivation side? Where does motivation come and how do you use that to help handle objections?
Figure out, they may tell you straight up in the first appointment, when you first buyer appointment, they may tell you what the motivation is. A lot of times, they don't tell you exactly what it is, or you figure it out as you go along. There's number 1 and number 2 motivations. So it might be school districts or whatever, and they love Deep Run and Glen Allen and Godwin or whatever, and really they've only been looking at houses in Deep Run. Like, hey guys, we're getting our teeth kicked in. You know, your kids in pre-K. Let's focus on Glen Allen and Godwin. It's a little less competitive, still very competitive there, and see just a little bit of a pivot as well. You know, just go back to that motivation. And really, it's just, you know, buying versus renting. You know, really you're throwing the money away for renting property right now, and you don't have to hit them over the head with that. They kind of know that, and they could be paying off their house, and as it's appreciating at the same time, and getting a tax write-off. Just surprised, a lot of people don't know about the mortgage interest deduction, and that's something to bring up as well. I tell them to, you know, whatever they're, you know, if they love Dave Ramsey or whatever on YouTube, give them to watch some of that stuff, you know, if they're that kind of client.
I think the motivation though comes with the education too, especially on the buy side. Like, we have to be honest with these people. There's almost nothing on the market in some of these really good areas. I mean, if they truly want to buy, we may have to go further out. And if they're not willing to do that at all, it's gonna be tough.
Yeah.
So I think setting the stage early with things like that helps a ton too.
Yeah, it's when they say it's gotta be an acre, it's like, tell me about, what do you need an acre for? You're just looking for privacy enough? Yeah, probably so. If I found something that was a half acre that backed up to preservation or woods, would that work? Oh yeah, that would work too. Well, all of a sudden your search just tripled from, if you had it typed in as 1 acre to half acre, for example, the number of listings just tripled.
Yeah, so it seems like if there's, and especially into this market we're dealing with now, if there's, it's maybe the worst time for somebody who's not quite as motivated, because they're just not gonna be.
It's gonna be a tough road.
It's a tough road, and no matter what kind of skills you have as an objection handler, if the motivation isn't there, then maybe it's, you know, maybe you need to sort of think about moving on.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's what I kind of came to the conclusion after we talked about this is, you're gonna come with that client, you got a client, they wanna buy a house, they know they're easy to work with, a good personality, but they're still not that motivated. Don't feel secure that you have a client right then. You really don't. You're still taking them along the process. They're not gonna equal a commission anytime soon, maybe. So don't let that say, oh yeah, I've got them working with this person every weekend. Well, the chances of you getting commission out of that are pretty low. You need to have other clients. Don't settle.
It's almost like, I don't know who coined the phrase of having a suspect versus having a prospect.
There you go.
Right. What are things that when you're talking about objection handling, what are some things that don't work? I mean, what are some mistakes that maybe you guys have made or that you've seen other agents make that maybe we could help flatten the learning curve and have some things people steer away from?
I think talking too much is always a bad thing, you know, especially when you're at the negotiating table working with the seller. I think you want to be the one asking questions and trying to let them verbal vomit versus you verbal vomit.
Well, eventually you said it based on how effective it was when you basically went down the list. Basically, you're asking questions. You're saying, do you want to eliminate number 1? No.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a series of elimination for him. I mean, he needed that, you know, to get to where I needed him to go.
But you could have said, well, you know, these are the great things we're doing. I mean, everybody wants to have their home, you know, staged and whatever else, and just verbal vomit on all the things you're going to do.
Yeah, no, it was my favorite appointment I've ever been on. I had a good time with that guy. Mission complete with the challenge, but
what else might you not want to do?
You don't want it to be adversarial. You're working on, just remember, you're working on behalf of this person. They may come off adversarial to you, but you have to kind of dodge that or not go with that. You're going back to the data. Let's see what's sold in Deep Run High School test and see what, you know, don't take that personally, because they probably don't mean it personally most of the time. Sometimes they might, but you go right back to the data and show the days on market, the list price versus sales price, you know, all those things, the inventory, how long things are sitting on the market. You're going right back to that. So it's not your opinion against their opinion. Now you're in an argument. And that's, if you win the argument, you lose the client. You know, if you lose the argument, You got somebody driving the ship who's never driven the ship before.
Yeah, stick to the facts, especially when you're pricing, you gotta stick to the facts, but you don't wanna beat them over the head, but you wanna try to figure out why they don't wanna go with your number and why they wanna go with their number. I mean, if they're in fantasy land, you gotta get them back to reality.
I think a lot of, I've done it many a times, I've seen a lot of newer agents, a lot of agents do it, like, whatever their client, whatever their client's thinking, they buy into that to be friendly with the client and have the client like them and everything else, where what you really need to do is talking to your fellow teammates, the top agents in your office, come to the sales meeting, talk to people, see where things stand. You know, we do that a lot, Dean and I do that a lot, and that way we have a basis of professional knowledge that we're going with. We aren't, you know, arm in arm with the seller buying into whatever they've read on USA Today, which doesn't apply to the Richmond market at all. You know?
Let's take it out to the group here. What are some of the objections that you hear most commonly today? We'll write those down, then we'll talk about some of those. Fire away, whoever. Or unless maybe y'all don't hear any objections. Mike's heard an objection, and so is Cindy. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, the one I think is sticking to everybody now is I wanna wait and see, and when y'all mentioned it, I've just gotta wait and see what's gonna happen. I think, you know, house prices are coming down, or interest rates are gonna come down. I just wanna wait and see how it settles out.
Okay, that's a good one.
I think that's the paralyzing one today.
I mean, I think if you're truly one of those people that believe interest rates are coming down, why wouldn't you buy now and refinance when they come down, number one? And if you buy now and they go up to 10, and you get 7.5 now, you look like a genius. So where do you lose if you buy now? I mean, that would be my question to the buyer. Where do you lose if you buy now?
And
I don't think you do.
and if rates do come back down, you guys probably agree with us, we've talked about it. I think if rates hit 5% Friday, how do you think the traffic will be this weekend with open houses? So yeah, the rates have come down, all of a sudden, but hey, you got that many other people you're fighting with and trying to get the house, so guess what? You didn't get it because now there's 30 offers instead of 5, you know, and I think that's a reality, and you just point back to a year, 2 years ago when that was happening all the time and rates got crazy.
What causes prices to come down?
High inventory.
Is that in the foreseeable future?
Low demand.
Was that in 2010? Was that the issue in 2010?
Yeah, we showed 40 houses to each buyer.
Yeah. So
Low demand.
If you have low supply and high demand, are prices coming down?
No.
Mike?
Not an objection, but my answer to that problem. Nobody ever wants to put any facts to what's going on. They wanna wait and see what the interest rates are gonna do. Well, Truist, if you look, Truist shut down their trading of their bonds division, their mortgage-backed securities. So when big players like Truist Bank are getting out of the market, they're shutting down their whole division. They made the announcement in April. They weren't the first one, they're just the first big one that most of us know who they are. Truist shut down, no more mortgage-backed securities. So if the buyers for loans are going away, so if Town Bank does 100 million in loans, they package them and they sell them on the secondary market as mortgage-backed securities. If those buyers are going away, the only way banks can sell mortgages is to make them more attractive to those buyers, which to make it more attractive is higher yields, which means our rates are gonna continue to increase. So I don't know how scientific you wanna get, but I usually try to bring some facts to the game when people say they're gonna wait. So, Dean, you think you're gonna wait, the rates are gonna come down. Why do you think they're gonna come down? And let me tell you why I think they're gonna go up. Fewer buyers for mortgages than ever before. Rates are only gonna go up, so do you wanna wait in this house for 5 years or 10 years?
Or even maybe better, you know, is the school district, is this school district gonna improve over those 5 years?
Yeah.
that you're gonna have to wait? Are you gonna have 2 more bedrooms miraculously show up, to bed the twins down in,
Yeah.
or?
What's the cost of private school versus getting in the school district you want?
Right. Yeah, back to the motivation. What other objections that you see?
With land, most recently, someone told me they didn't wanna sell because then they'd have to figure out what to do with the money.
Okay.
Tough problem.
Yeah, we plenty of people. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, interest rates on savings accounts aren't high, they said they had bad experience with rental properties in the past, I tried to give them some options, but that's something that I've heard is, inflation's high, what do I do with 300 grand cash?
Crypto.
Right.
A lot of.
Yeah, I've never had that objection, but I mean,
Tell them to meet with a financial advisor. Like, they always
They'll
say
take
sell
it.
the land.
They'll take the
They got
land.
ideas and it's not in real estate. They won't buy a rental house.
what you got, Cindy?
Well, the big one for most sellers is, well, where am I gonna go? And they really don't think there's a solution, unless y'all have found that out, but I think it goes back to the education part, right? I mean,
And motivation.
And motivation,
And motivation.
you know, are you willing to go into a hotel while your new construction home gets finished? Are you know, I think asking all those things up front, are you willing to try to get a rental in a further out area? You know, and I think if they check all those boxes, then I think you got something to work with.
Yeah, and I think that's what the newer folks who haven't done it quite as much need to know, that you've got to, it's
Lay
not
some-
arguing, you're giving them options, you're
Laying
giving
out-
them
laying out
information and options on ways to solve it.
I think if you know you've got somebody super motivated, if they're willing to go to a hotel. I mean, I've had that where they're like, we gotta get out of this house, you know, we gotta find something. And I'd make sure, number one, are you willing to go further out, and I name 4 or 5 counties. And if the answer is yes, then I'm like, all right, are you willing to go into a hotel? You willing to go into a rental in those 4 or 5 counties? If they check all those boxes, then I'm gonna try to work hard for them.
Yeah, put your stuff in one of those pod storage, something like that, and park it for a little while.
Yeah.
Find the right place.
This is kind of in line with the last question, but if I'm a homeowner locked in at less than 3%, why would I move, and then pay higher rates?
Good job transfer.
Well, yeah, look, I'm just saying, that's a question too, and
Yeah.
it kinda goes back to, well, you gotta keep trying to find your right kind of clients to work with, maybe that's not the best one, but that is an objection I've heard too, just curious what y'all thought.
Yeah, it has to supersede that. What the things we've talked about are people coming in, job transfers.
Motivation. What's the
yeah,
motivation?
What's the motivation? Divorce, marriage, blended family, whatever it might be. And then maybe the baby boomers who need to smart size, downsize, they could not wrap their heads around the market that we've seen. They may not have a mortgage anyway, and they're selling and buying something with cash, so it may not be an issue, but those are what we talked about, that's who we're focusing on right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to get listings, I think you've gotta go back to your COI and try to ask them questions on how they can help you find, it's maybe a little weird, you know, do you have a relationship with an attorney that maybe does divorces? Do you have a relationship with an estate attorney? Do you know an estate attorney? Somehow to get into the estate attorney, divorce attorney, nursing home, you know, long-term care administration,
HR people.
investors that own rental houses that are only one-sided deals that wanna sell because the market's at all-time highs. I mean, you gotta find some of those one-sided deals where there's not a buyer, where there's just a listing. If you try not to beat your head against the wall sometimes.
You know, one thing that came to my mind is if you think about somebody on the seller side saying, we're thinking about moving, is this a good market for somebody who's just pondering it? How about
I'd
we,
be asked, I'd be searching
how
for that
about,
motivation.
the next one would be, we would like to move. And I guess, and then the next, as you move up the chain to, we have to move. You know, now, probably more than ever, it's closer to we have to move, because it's so easy to talk yourself out of, you know, maybe in 2015, you know, you're just driving down the road and you just pop into model home, and next thing you know, you're signing on the dotted line. Now there's just too many ways to talk yourself out of doing something on a whim.
Yeah. I think it really matters too where they're moving to. Are they moving to an area with higher inventory than where they're leaving? then it's probably a good time to sell. I'm working with a lot of people in the area that are moving from maybe Richmond down to Lancaster. I mean, there's more inventory on the water in Lancaster probably than any other county. So for them, selling in an area that has very little inventory, selling at all-time highs, and moving to an area that has a little bit more inventory, I think the answer is, heck yeah, it's a great time to move. So I think you gotta dig deeper into some of those more pre-qualification questions to see.
You just need more prospects right now. In 2021, anybody could have been a buyer. You could buy an investment property, a second home, upsize, like literally people were buying and they hadn't even thought about it because the rates and payments were so good. Now, the opposite's happening. You know, you need more clients because they may talk themselves out of it.
How about other objections that you're hearing?
So what if they wanna sell, but then they can't get pre-approved to buy? And their mortgage right now is $1,500. They're willing to rent, but the rent market's kind of the same, and we don't really want them to rent, you know?
Well, that may be a case, but Brett said one-sided deal, maybe if the motivation is there and it makes sense for them to sell now and rent, and then, you know, maybe a slower shopping process for whatever they purchase next as they get their credit right or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, but I would, I mean, I guess they can't qualify because prices are so high and interest rates are high, correct?
And credit's low.
Okay, so we
Well,
can work on that.
Well, sometimes there's a difference between an objection and a condition. I
Okay.
mean, the condition really, you can't, there's something happening that's just not allowing it to work, like not being qualified. I mean, somebody who's a buyer, forget the selling part, but if they're a buyer, I mean, you can answer all the objections you want, but if Town First Mortgage gives them the old ixnay on the mortgage, then unless they got a rich uncle or something, it ain't gonna happen. And so that, you can't, that's not really an objection, that's a condition.
I mean, I think for
So
the
what
buyer,
would you do then?
sell the house and get.
How motivated are they to sell it? I mean, do they have to sell it?
Not really, no.
And then you just need to find out why they wanna sell it.
Yeah,
They
will.
sort of wanna do it.
We'll get them in touch
Thinking
with a
about
lender
it.
to work on how to get their credit where
Yeah.
it needs to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Long
sometimes
term.
telling them that you don't believe it's a good idea for them to move right now and recognizing the condition builds better trust anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think exhausting the inventory for these buyers, if you got a buyer, I mean, you gotta be sending out letters to these neighborhoods they wanna be in, you know, I have a buyer letter. I don't know how many of you guys subscribe to like all the auction websites, but that's a great place to find, depending on if you're working with investors or just a regular homeowner. I mean, there's Dudley's Auctions, Motley's Auctions, Transon Auction, Auction.com. There's a lot of them that have auctions locally here. Grindstaff, I mean, they sell houses, so are you truly exhausting all the avenues that potentially work for your buyer?
And make sure you know how it works before you send it to them.
They gotta read the fine print.
Yeah, cause, yeah.
I mean, if you've got a buyer that has a ton of equity, they can pull an equity line and pay cash for auction property, then that could be a potential avenue for them.
I'm just talking about like the buyer's premium, for example, all of a
Yeah.
sudden you send it to them, it's a hot deal at 200, whatever it is, then they gotta pay you on top of that.
15% buyer premium.
Yeah.
I mean, there's hitches in all those things, but I mean, at the same time, it could be an avenue for a potential buyer.
What other ones?
I guess it kind of going along with the commission objection is there's, like in your case, obviously you have the guy 2 years later, but you have some really loyal clients, repeat clients, kind of a sell-buy situation. In which cases have you discounted your commission, or is it just always non-negotiable?
I mean, I would like to say it's non-negotiable, but I have some really, really good friends like that I was raised with back home that I've done a couple deals with them. I'm getting ready to do another deal. I sold them a 600 back in the day. It's gonna be like $1 million now, and I'm probably gonna chisel that off to 5.
Yeah, but you would take the 2.
Oh, no, well, I mean, I actually offered it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's more often than not, you're the one offering it versus like agreeing
Correct.
to their.
Yeah, if they want it, then it's gonna be a fight.
Yeah.
If I'm giving it, then, you know what I mean? If they're bringing up the chisel on me, then I'm gonna try to figure out how to get it, without getting too, standoff.
And it doesn't have to be percentages either, it could be, hey, I get it, knock $2,000 off. $2,000 a lot of times is a lot less than
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah.
An objection that, I've seen a couple of times is somebody's building a house and doesn't feel like they need representation. Run into that often, or at all?
Sometimes when it's too late, they've already acted without you.
More often than not.
If that comes up in our first meeting, that maybe new construction, boom, I'm laying that groundwork early, you know? And same thing when I say, if you go to an open house, you guys just pop in one, or new house, make sure you tell them that we're working together. Cause I've seen some nightmare situations where the builder didn't get their act together. I've got some clout, I've worked with a lot of these builders before. The walkthrough sometimes is great, a lot of times there's some issues, and we've done a ton of them, so I'd like to go with you on that and walk you through the process. It doesn't cost you any more, the price is the price, so. And sometimes we've been able to negotiate a little bit better deal, depending who they are, so.
And if they, you know, if they were to come with me with that, I'd probably agree with them to a certain degree, like, you're probably correct, you don't if the transaction goes like it's supposed to.
Right.
But if you run into a snag, you're gonna need somebody there on your behalf, so if that's a risk you wanna take.
A lot of times, pricing out a new house, most people have never done it before, don't understand the process. And I'm there helping facilitate the process. My relationship with the different sales agents for the different builders around town is, I kinda know the processes or whatever, so
And the
I'm
people
there.
involved and all that stuff.
Exactly, helping, you know, assure the buyer, oh yeah, this is right, or this is where, I'd skip on that, let's put your money somewhere else. you
Well,
know?
Blake, kind of what you said too, like agreeing with them almost and understanding, like I understand why you would say that, and you raising this to help educate both of us so we get through it, so it'll make it easier for everybody, but here's the reason why.
Yeah, the price has not changed.
Right.
I mean, they're not gonna negotiate more than I am.
Right.
I mean, if they're using me, you're likely gonna pay less and get a better experience.
And I think that's maybe the best way to handle a lot of objections is agreeing with them up front and telling them why
Yeah.
they shouldn't do it that way.
Yeah, you gotta affirm, what they say you have to affirm, you can't just act like my kids and before I'm finished talking, they're interrupting me, you know, like that doesn't, I don't like that, and buyers or sellers don't like that either, so.
Yeah, you're really not making them wrong,
Yeah,
you're just showing them how there's a different way.
Yeah.
it could work very good for them, but it could be a train wreck.
Yeah.
How do you know, how risky do you wanna be?
And it's rarely I, it's we, or my experience, or the market says, or the data, or, you know, whatever it might be, you know.
I was sort of thinking about how, you know, personality types and personality profiling might come into play for this. And Blakey, you said something about pre-qualifying, and I wanted you to clarify that too, because pre-qualifying, not like pre-qualifying for the mortgage, you're talking
No.
with pre-qualifying, and are you thinking about personality types and profiling as you do that?
There's no question. If I know I got an engineer, then I better be prepared, fully prepared, super analytical. They always give you, that's the toughest one for me, cause that's not really the way I roll. It's not really the way I was taught. But, you know, the pre-qualification, the listing, you know, appointment, I've got the questions right here. I mean, you're trying to figure out, number one, the number one question on the Mike Ferry one is, do you absolutely have to sell? And I mean, once I get my answer, and if the answer is yes, then it's gonna make my life so much easier, cause I know I'm working with a live body that's gotta move. And then I figure out why they have to move. If it's a job transfer, and then they start beating me up on certain things, and I'm pivoting back. You got a job transfer, we gotta get this thing priced correctly, you gotta be there in 3 months. You know, the average days on market is X, we gotta get this thing listed in 2 weeks, whatever the case may be. You gotta be well prepared.
Mr. Smith, could you tell them what that buyer pre-qualification script really says?
The buyer one?
In the buyer, for the seller
Seller.
pre-qualification script.
You absolutely have to sell your home. Will you price your home to sell? Do you want me to handle the sale for you? That's the short version.
That's actually called the 1-minute listing presentation.
I've used that. It works sometimes. You never even meet with the people. I mean, especially if you sold them the house. How many houses have you listed that you sold them the house? You know what the house looks like. You've been over to visit over the years. They call you.
Photographer will be out Wednesday.
You give them the price. You email them the listing agreement to sign. And the first time you see the house, when you put the sign up. I mean, I've done that before. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen. If what I say makes sense and you feel comfortable and confident, can you sell your home? And I can sell your home, are you planning to list your home with me tonight? And, you know, will you sign the contract now? And if that doesn't work, are you planning to interview other agents to sell your home? I usually don't like that question, because I don't wanna put that idea in their head. Tell me again, where are you moving to? So checking motivation one more time. How soon do you have to be there? Checking motivation one more time. When I see your home, how much do you wanna list your home for? So, I mean, you gotta ask all these questions, because if they want more for their home than their home is worth, then you know you got a challenging appointment, you better be well prepared. Will you help finance your home for the buyer? Would you please describe your home for me? So this is what I get into, you know, tell me about your roof, your HVAC, all those type of things. I'll be sending over a pre-listing package. Will you have a few minutes to review it? Do you have any questions before I arrive? So you know, our meeting should last about 10 to 15 minutes. Is that okay? I've been looking forward to seeing you then. That's it. And I mean, I still use this one to this day, and then it goes on the next page, address of your home, what year your home was built, what style. And I think the more questions you ask up front and figure out, the less objections you're probably gonna get down the road.
Do those questions that you ask, does that ever flush out? Like, you ever like go through that and you're like, oh, I know when I get there, they're gonna come to me with.
Yeah.
It's like, what are some of the things that trigger that?
I mean, you know, what do you want to sell your home for? I mean, if they tell me 400 and I know it's 300, I mean, you better have substantial information
Yeah.
to not necessarily beat them over the head with, but convince them why they should be listing at your price and not at their price.
So through pre-qualification, at least you can sort of get a scouting report of what might be coming.
You know what you're.
Okay.
Yeah, and I
You
think
prepare.
that also helps probably, you know, without meeting the people face to face, if this is somebody you don't know, maybe help a little bit with the personality profile. You know?
Absolutely. Or maybe even find yet another reason right before, hey, just wanna check, is that garage finished off any, or is that new? I was checking the tax records and the satellite imagery and whatever. What was this guy's got going on?
Yeah.
It's like, and then one more chance to kind of bond with them, so it's really your third or fourth appointment by the time you meet them for the first time. Get a lot further away.
Adrian, back to the question about the personality. So I know that sometimes you know, like we talk, it feels like you've done like a full psychoanalysis on some of the people.
Sometimes.
How does that play into what you're doing, and why do you do that, and how then once you figure something out, how do you go from there?
Yeah, that's kind of I've got a strong analytical personality as well, but I can pivot and talk to most people. So I like to understand the person. So sometimes people ride the roller coaster on the sales process, and they freak out one day, or they do this, or they do that. And I'm kind of the same calm guy, calm presence at the end of the day, no matter what's happening, you know, whether we make the sale, lose the house, get the house or not. But at the same time, I hear them out and let them know I'm working for them. Whatever their hot button or the things that are most important to them, I let them know and repeat that I heard them. So I try to be a really good listener no matter who it is. I listen a lot more than I talk, ask questions and go from there and then affirm it, so.
Very good. Yes.
At what point in your process is on each respective side, do you ever decide, or are there any tells where you're just like, you know what, best that I not take this client?
It's been some of the best decisions I've ever made. And I made a lot more money by letting them walk and letting them go.
I think that's an important thing to talk
Yeah.
about, because sometimes it just doesn't match up, and at what
Yeah.
point do you realize that in your meetings?
It takes me a long time to get there, unfortunately, you know, because usually I can battle it out and win them out in most scenarios. But the ones really have a screw loose is the ones that you can't handle, in my experience. You know? It's either condition, they're not recognizing their condition. They cannot buy a house right now, or can't sell, whatever it might be, or they have a screw loose.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had that problem with as many sellers as I personally have had with buyers.
Yeah.
That just, you know, they won't pull the trigger when the trigger needs to be pulled, and that opportunity's been there many times, and they just won't do it. I think eventually I just part ways.
And it sure feels good when that happens. I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, I've never let somebody go that I went back and said, I wish, no matter what happened. I mean, if the house turns around and sells, good for them.
Yeah.
You know, that's great. I'm not cheering against them, but I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah, the handful of people I've fired have flipped it around and like begged me to keep working for them. And I'm like, no, because they're missing some emotional, I don't know. It's been interesting, but every time it's like, because it just brings you down. Like, it's not that transaction in my book, and I think in most people as well. I mean, it brings your whole life down, it brings all your other clients down, they're in your head, and it's just screwing everything up. And you're like, gosh, but it's a big commission or whatever. No, it's not, because they're not gonna buy, you know?
Yeah.
Or they get under contract and it blows up 3 times or whatever, so.
Never gonna see that money anyway.
Yeah, good question, Errol. That's good.
Long
And thank you, Errol, for
process,
asking a
but-
question so far in every single,
You know, I always.
I know you did. I know you did.
Active participant.
Even though you sort of sit in the back, but one day you'll sit in
I'm
the
always
front.
listening, no, I take notes too.
I know. What other questions do you have for the expert panel? You guys have any questions for them? I think the question is, what is it gonna cost you if you don't try to improve your skills as an objection handler? You know, what do you think? I would think that's probably the single biggest expense in your business if you don't try to upgrade your skills in this area. Cause it can, I mean, Rodney will tell you, what was our objection handler we used to use all the time?
Okay,
And we want you to cut your commission, Rodney.
all right,
Okay, we want you to have this house held open every day.
no problem.
And we want you to get a sign with a light and the big thing like Batman.
Mike's got that.
Yeah, I mean, that was before we ever started talking about this, you just sort of just went with it, you know? And if you can put up some kind of resistance, and a lot of times it's protecting yourself and your own value, you know, not only doing a better job for the seller, because if you cave, let's say on pricing, who are you really hurting? Seller. Why?
Racking up days on market, gonna need multiple reductions, and ultimately they'll probably get less.
What is a house, in today's market, what is a house that has 45 days on market, what does that communicate to most buyers?
Something's wrong with it. What's wrong with
It's
it?
haunted or something. And really, whose fault is that? In every case, what's the problem? Price. And so, whose fault is that? In most cases, it's the agent. So there's a good example of that. All right, without further ado, Benjamin, what's the next one we have? That's
Blakely's beautiful wife, Margaret, and Tom
Nice.
Rogers, my beautiful father.
There you go. The beautiful people coming next.
This
we're
would
talking
be,
about-
it's like your money management, 201 class. Talk about real estate investing, some LLCs, things like that. Be pretty cool.
Yeah, which could be a good thing, Jeff, back to what you're talking about, what to do with the money and maybe where the money is, might be a good one to pick up some tips for those future.
Then the first Wednesday in September, I believe, is Kevin with the buyer forum. Kevin Long.
Very good.
Good.
All right, thank you guys, thank you, and we'll see you next time.